In the virtual setting, there'll be a split screen showing what they might be showing on the screen as well as the person. If we have questions that would come from either the gallery or anyone else, if those questions come from an unmiked person, we're going to ask the presenter to repeat the question so that all those attending virtually will know what we're answering. So as for public comment, if there are appropriate from the chair to open the meeting for public comment, those attending virtually will be on mute and they should request to be heard. They should request to be heard through the chat feature. Whenever we will keep it in this view here that you see now on the screen, except for whenever the presenter is using it for a screen for the PowerPoint. So those attending virtually, if you will send a chat if you would like to be heard on a particular issue, and when the chair recognizes the public for public comment, we will notify the chair that you would like to speak and unmute you at the appropriate time. If anyone wants to speak during the public comment that's in the room, they'll need to do that from this podium. Do I have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Britt. We can go around. Matt, do you want to do introductions or just proceed? Okay, we'll just proceed. Item 2 is approval of the February 11th, 2021 committee meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve those.
Motion to approve by Councilman Kemna. Is there a
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilman Lester. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Item 3, new business. Number 1 is the Airport Advisory Committee membership. Mr. Smith just made him come right back out.
Before I walked away from the podium, I should have looked at you.
Make sure you speak into the microphone, Brett.
Yes, item number 1. This issue was looked at by the Airport Advisory Committee. The Airport Advisory Committee is actually a fairly young committee in the terms of the city, about 12 years old. Currently, the code seems to have a bit of ambiguity in that it says that a representative from our full-time FBO shall be on the committee, but then it also has another section which enacts term limits for all the positions on the committee. It is our recommendation that the FBO brings a lot of value to that commission, and we would like to bring forward a bill to the council that would relieve that particular position of the term limits. And a copy of the proposed bill is in your packet. If you have any questions, be happy to answer them.
Any questions?
And just as a point of clarification.
There you are.
As a point of clarification, it's not an elimination of term limit, but it's actually making the term limit coterminous with the representative's affiliation with the FBO. So it's not like someone could be on there representing the FBO, sever that relationship with the FBO, and then still remain on the airport. The point is to keep a representative of the FBO on at all times. So,
Any questions, comments? I'd entertain a motion to send forth to the council. It's been moved by Schreiber, seconded by Fitzwater. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you, Britt. Item 2, which I suspect is what some folks are here for, discussion of future sales tax projects. And I would just offer a statement at the beginning just to say that, I think this is informational discussion purposes today. This committee doesn't hold any authority to make a final decision on projects for inclusion in a capital improvement sales tax proposal. So, Mr. Marash.
All right, thank you. I'll kind of pull this down so you can hear me maybe a little better, but we've talked about sales tax at the last work session, and basically the purpose of this is just kind of further explain some of our recommendations at that time and kind of drill down because there was questions about other projects, where would they fit, things like that. So the purpose of this kind of go through like a laundry list of projects, things that have been discussed, have traffic studies on them already at one point or time, and just where do those fit in the picture of the next sales tax. Now, some of this is very scientific, and some of it's a little bit political, obviously, the process. So we're just doing the best job we can. We looked at like three kind of pools of money, if you will, and we said, well, we know we have these bridge issues, so that's kind of one pool. Can't, not putting all your eggs in one basket was another theory we thought of, but we know we need to work on a bridge. We have a couple of them that are in pretty bad shape. Then we looked at some intersections and corridors that have some traffic issues. So in other words, a traffic issue type problem, pool of money. And then on the third pool, just an economic development pool of money. A lot of times as we go through these sales taxes, for whatever reason, we built railroad crossings and all kinds of things with them based on some new thing coming to town that needed a little help with some maybe road work or something. And then a fourth category we didn't include actually, but folks often talk about new corridors that don't exist today. I think I saw Glover Brown here earlier, or no, not Glover. And they had discussed at the meeting, at the work session, extending Mission Drive, so things like that. But besides that, we had a few other corridors on there that people have brought up over the years, and whether it's from county individuals or whoever. And so we thought we'd talk about those a little bit, but we didn't recommend they be included at this time. So that's kind of where the pools of money came from, and that's just our staff recommendations or thinking on it from the public works standpoint. But if we could go with, I guess we didn't have any pictures about bridges, but let's talk about those real quick. I know, I think it was Laura Ward brought up the Ohio Street Bridge the other day, and we had obviously went ahead and stated working on the High Street Viaduct or bridge, whatever you want to refer to it as. Both are needed projects, obviously, but the High Street, with the amount of traffic it carries and the connections, if it were to have a major flood, having the connection when, the highway is under floodwaters, which happened in the past, the High Street Bridge was what carried the traffic to downtown east-west. So pretty important project. We have chunks of concrete falling off of it. We've done maintenance on it over the years. Our own street department will go out and do things, and we're removing loose concrete, and lo and behold, we'll get a hole through the deck all the way through. You can see daylight. So we put that back and keep working on it in that fashion. But if you were to go underneath, you'd see a lot of spalling concrete, things like that. We get complaints about the concrete falling on the sidewalks below, things like that. And so it's a big project, obviously. And I know the county mentioned it in their presentation as well, but it's something I think would need worked on. We've had a study done. It was been almost probably 10 years ago or something on the bridge, and so we're just estimating that cost to be around $5 million in today's dollars. But once you get into it, there's all kinds of options. Some people say take it out, remove it, don't replace it. Others, shorten it, do this, do whatever. Well, we can all say that, but once we till we get into it and study the issue through our engineering company that we would hire to do that, we don't really know what the fix is. It may be just a major repair too, on the other hand, but that would look almost like a new bridge. But maybe we'll be able to salvage some pieces of it and save a little money. That's possible, but we just don't know yet. But we're suggesting we ought to go ahead and work on it in this next 5-year sales tax in some fashion. So obviously, like on the Dunklin Bridge, when you do these things, you bring them up to standard. It's got sidewalks on it. It's got a kind of a railing that doesn't comply with current standards, too short. The lighting is not great. It's kind of rusty old poles and overhead lines, things like that. So all that would be upgraded or contemplated to be upgraded during this project if we undertake it. Just like any city project you see, it always be brought up to standard at the time. Sidewalks included. Ramps and all the above. So also, it's on the main path of our fire station, Station 1 there too. So pretty important asset to the city. Now, not to minimize Ohio Street Bridge, but carries very little traffic. The way around it's Kansas Street, about a block over. When you hit Missouri Boulevard at Kansas Street, you obviously have a signal you can get out at, so it's a little better from that standpoint. But certainly, if monies were available, and we tried to then also include cost here, relative cost, planning level cost for each of these, that'd be about a $500,000 deal to replace that, and that certainly could be a project, but we're not recommending it at this time. So. Okay. Yeah, so this is like the trial and error on this this meeting a little bit, so so everybody needs to bear with us. But anyway, if there's any questions about these, I'd be glad to try to answer them. We have other people here to probably answer them as well. Anything on bridges? So that's what we looked at there.
Just on Ohio Street Bridge, how long has that been out?
I don't recall the date. Britt, do you have a off the top of your head? They're telling me about 3 years-ish.
Any other questions? Proceed.
Okay. Oh, I'd also point out, now these costs are the total cost for the project, but these are city-county projects. So, the total pool right now is contemplated to be $11 million, $5.5 million from each entity, and projects in the city, obviously, that the counties help contributing towards. So on the next one, we said, well, okay, intersections, corridors, traffic problems, things like that, and David was good enough to make kind of a master plan slide for Stadium Corridor, which is what we kind of recommended in this pool, and we recommended about $3 million there. What I highlighted in red in your memo would total $11 million, which is the full pool. But this kind of deal, we've been working on the Stadium Corridor obviously for a long time. So, ever since I've been here, we really started working on the roundabout down by the high school and working from that direction, and obviously then did the roundabout there at Stadium and Jefferson. And then, but we also been working up towards Missouri Boulevard back the other way. We worked with developers at the time, Target and various ones, to get various sidewalks in, signals, all that kind of thing, and get our pedestrian connections as well. And so kind of what remains is the area in between, and it's very similar to what we did to McCarty Street over the last 20 plus years. There was projects downtown since I've been here, lighting upgrades, signal upgrades on this end. Walmart goes in, so we start working from that end too. We have a project through the rock cut, and they're kind of small projects as they go, but eventually we get the corridor upgraded throughout its length, and we're really pretty well done with the McCarty corridor. If you were ever to drive through there, it's got sidewalks from stem to stern, all new signals, all that kind of stuff in the last 20 years. So what's left on why we're talking about Stadium Corridor, obviously I think if you live in Jeff City, you know that you probably travel Stadium Corridor a lot to do a lot of different things, whether it's go to school, medical services, Cap Regions on one end of it. It's a vital corridor, that kind of the first loop of Jefferson City, and so it carries about 10,000 cars a day. I think I had some questions about traffic numbers and things like that. We have different numbers in various locations, but yeah, about 10,000 cars a day, and we have traffic studies on almost every intersection. David shows up there that there's need for some improvement. Now, this is just an idea and a master plan. There's not sidewalks on it. If you go out after school, you see all the cross-country kids from various, 2 or 3 different high schools now, probably running this corridor. Just a lot of traffic going wherever it's going. Uses the corridor. That's a pretty high traffic count for a city street at 10,000 cars a day. So there's a lot of things that could be done. We're not suggesting any particular project right now, but I kind of left a menu there. There's various intersections at Stadium Southwest, Edgewood roundabouts that came about with the new high school. That's shown on one end. Stadium Satin Wood down there, we had some stormwater problems. That probably whole intersection needs upgraded with a new box. And we kind of did some relative costs. There's obviously on this list, in that whole corridor, there's almost $11 million of projects. Obviously, we're not going to do them all in one sales tax, but But yeah, we feel like we should keep working at it and pick one or two of those off as we go. And then, you know, subsequent years, go ahead and keep building out this corridor, much like happened on McCarty Street, another pretty important corridor. Other things that have been, had traffic studies and been talked about over the years, we'll apply for money. I think the Truman and Scott Station actually might have made it into a old sales tax years ago, and we did do some minor upgrades there and did a traffic study on it, but never fully completed the full repair that wouldn't be needed there, and you get quite a bit of backup in the morning. Seven Hills and Greenberry and kind of Ellis Boulevard and Greenberry, kind of two other intersections that are four-way stops on a major corridor out at, and David has particular, if we want to talk about any particular one, he can go right to it, kind of a blow up. But on that corridor, obviously, Ellis, pretty important corridor to the city, City Street, that certainly could use some upgrades in the future. I don't think the traffic dictates it right now, but it's on the list to, you know, be thinking about. And a lot of these things make their way into other planning groups like Campo studies, things like that too. So we go back and kind of mine through all the different traffic studies we have and look at these things. As we keep going, then the Monroe Street, we've talked about it a couple different times in the past. I think there was some discussion about, you know, there was a question asked several years ago and about, you know, what can we do to the Monroe corridor? And really just a planning level, if you were to rip everything out and stem to stern and make it a boulevard type roadway, you know, it's probably a $3 million project. But a lot of what I hear is, you know, well, what about it just getting it two-way traffic at least? It carries about 1,000 cars a day right now. Obviously, I know Capital Region Hospital is continuing to make improvements there and hopes to grow, you know, continues to grow the business of that medical facility. And then you got school things going on with Jefferson City High School. Obviously, they took a few students away, but it'll grow back over time and new sports facilities and whatnot. Could we make it two-way and really address, you know, the rock cut that's sloughing off and things like that? And that's about $1 million project. So, you know, you could look at that under a corridor improvement, or you could really look at it as kind of an economic development project, which is kind of the next pool of money where we hadn't really assigned any money anyway. You know, with things going on, that it's not unusual for the city to contribute to roadway projects around when there's new construction, such as Elias High School. We did a little bit of road work near the new stadium. Obviously have worked with the high school when they put their new high school in, working on the road down the hill to connect to Creek Trail. So it wouldn't be unusual, kind of an economic development type spin-off project to work on that. So I included it and kind of highlighted in blue. I know we've got a couple folks here wanting to talk about it. But that way, you know, you kind of see where that, in those categories that we came up with, it would kind of fit in either one. But right now, there's another $3 million in economic development money with really no particular project assigned to it that could be looked at for something like that, if that's what the council wanted to do. And again, you know, this is kind of a process where we, you know, the council weighs in and kind of, you know, on these, trying to set these priorities, and then of course then we have to go back and go over and talk to the county commission as well and and see what their thoughts are. And so, you know, we're kind of a middleman, if you will, trying to wrangle this group kind of together first. And we always keep Eric Landwehr and his staff involved in the process, but really we need to go up and talk to the county commission once the council kind of thinks they know which way they want to go, is the way I would look at it. Certainly other things on the list there. And we put economic development and grant matching on this pool. So what kind of, and that came up kind of as a thought of what MoDOT does lately. They're doing a lot of cost share projects, and not necessarily a grant, but Clark Avenue kind of fell under that for a while, and I included Clark Avenue on here, just the interchange part as well. But the rest of those are really about cost share projects if we wanted to take those on. People often call us about, hey, this interchange has got this problem, whatever. Why can't you guys do something? Well, they don't realize, you know, that maybe that's a MoDOT project. They just want it fixed, right? It's in the city. You know, why can't the city take this on and get something done? And so, you know, we've looked at all these various interchanges. They're in all kinds of campo studies and traffic studies the city has done over the last 15, 20 years. And, you know, whether it's Truman, basically all the interchanges could be improved in town from their current condition, whether it's Truman, Ellis, Southwest, Highway 179, Truman Industrial, which is a quasi-city state intersection. Country Club, Rainbow, there's a lot of traffic out there now with the big subdivisions. It's right on the edge of the city. Missouri Boulevard, 179, Clark, and then Clark. And so what I put there, that's the 50% match. So in other words, if the city or the city and county want to pursue a project on one of these interchanges for whatever reason, we would go to MoDOT and apply for money, and this 50% cost share money. So it's a way to get a project done in your city for about half price for the city resources. But it would still be on MoDOT right away and things like that typically. And at Missouri Boulevard 179, that is the complaint we hear from various car dealers in the area, that there's a lot of crashes there. And there are a lot of crashes there. I've been in studies with MoDOT, and they've looked at the corridor. There's no center turn lane for people to get out of the flow of traffic to get in those car dealerships. So when the 179 interchange was done, you know, that piece, basically, they ran out of money right there is what kind of happened, and space, quite frankly. You know, you're right up against the highway. So that's where, you know, we hear that complaint a lot. It comes directly to me, and Mr. Kroll hears it a lot, and I'm sure a lot of you do too. But it's on MoDOT right away, but that would be a way to fix that. It's not cheap, but could be done. So we included all those on there just so you know the information, not necessarily recommending any of them. And then as far as new roads and future development, well, you know, we hear a lot about extending Mission Drive, and a lot of times when we look at this, at least from my perspective, you know, if I'm advising anybody on it, there's a lot of developable ground in the city, whether it's at the Stadium Quarry, along Edgewood, the rock cut across from JCMG. We're getting ready to work on some roads at MSP and have other lots available. So there's a lot of lots that have existing infrastructure around them that could be worked on. But we do have master plans and drawn master plans over the years, especially when the hospital went in there at the St. Mary's Hospital to the right of the screen. But, you know, the way that occurred was we had a hospital wanting to come in, spend $200 or $300 million at the time, and they had that ground, and they approached the city, state, county, everyone, and but they actually, you know, had an actual development there ready to go. They issued a letter of credit to us to even build the road ahead of time. So the letter of credit would have paid us back for the road if they had not occupied the building. So it stayed in effect all the way through construction of the building. They got to reduce it over time as they went, but basically letter of credit just says you have the money in the bank to pay us back, and so that's how that occurred. Wouldn't be a bad thing to have a new corridor if you had a specific development. And this is just my advice to you, of course, but if you had a specific development ready to go, and, you know, willing to extend utilities and all the other things that go along with that. And so that's the issue on these corridors. And I'm not aware of that there is something like that for the Mission Drive or the Wildwood extension. I hear about the Wildwood extension, which is the blue line on the left side. The county went out and designed that. A lot of it is in the county, actually, not in the city limits. There's a piece up by Edgewood that's in the city limits, but most of that's very rugged terrain. Certainly be a nice loop to have. It would open up ground for development, but, you know, I feel like there's a lot of infill yet to happen along Edgewood already. We're starting to get a little movement on that with some new facilities coming in, but there's a lot of ground right there available right along Edgewood and the quarries in this area, so that, you know, in my mind, without a big development that's ready to go, I wouldn't spend your economic development dollars there for roadways. Then my iPad just went off. The other corridor, Militia Drive, that's been something that keeps being brought up over time, and I had very recently a developer. So if you go out to Militia Drive on the east end, the interchange looks like that. So we're talking about that kind of faint road, kind of pink colored, being extended over to Liberty Road. Certainly a nice thing to do. It's really mostly out in the county once you get past a little ways past the interchange. You know, if you live on Liberty Road, it'd be a nice connection to that interchange, but it really, there's plenty of developable ground here as well. I was out meeting with Command Web yesterday about their expansion, but there's a lot of chamber lots on the other side, already has utilities and all those hookups available. I think this came about when the highway department was shutting off some of the crossovers out there. And you know, really the point is that if your crossover is out, you still just come up to the interchange, make a loop, and go back on the highway. The only thing this would do is you wouldn't have to get on the highway. You still have to come up to the interchange and go back, if that's the real issue for the project. But again, I wouldn't suggest we do it at this point. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of benefit there to development or really anything in the city at this point. So it's not served by sewer at this point. You'd have to get the sewer there. The developer would typically have to do that. Every time somebody asks me about it, that's the issue. The sewer definitely is not there. It can be there. It's pretty expensive to get it there. But you know, if you look on the other side, the chamber's got a lot of property available, and others too. And that's kind of in the $50 million project list that we try to keep track of and we add to all the time. I think last sales tax is about 40 million. So, you know, projects go up and we try to look at the number and see if it's still reasonable, but add a few things here or there. But that's kind of a big menu there. I'm sure there's other things people can think of that we need to do. But be happy to answer any questions.
There any questions? So I suspect there might be a few public comments related to the projects. And I know, Mr. Sanders, you still have an item, but I think I'd rather get through this piece of the sales tax. Is that, if that's all right? And then go to you? Okay. Any questions, comments?
And if after all of that, you know, if you wanted to talk about some of the other pools of money that Public Works spends, like airport and various things, we certainly could. We don't have to, but we have all the people here that if you have questions, we can try to answer them.
All righty. Councilmember Fitzwater.
Just got one question, Matt. Maybe that's not time to talk about it. You were talking about the Missouri Boulevard 179 Wildwood, and I know it is a problem in that area where it is 2 lanes. There's no turn lane. Have you guys looked at doing like you did on McCarty and taking it from 2 to 1 lane and then putting a turn lane in? Is there any way to do that in there to kind of help in that little stretch?
Well, there's a lot of possibilities.
I know
Yeah.
it's a very complicated piece.
Yeah. And the probably one of the more complicating factors is what is the state willing to do with the roadway, and that has been looked at in some fashions a little bit, but not maybe to the extent we've done on city streets. The traffic number's really high there, and the speed's pretty high. Well, because we have 4 lanes, obviously, but you know, it might be a candidate, but the state didn't at the time. Last time we talked about it, didn't think it would be a good option.
Any other questions, comments? I assume Mr. Calvaruso, Freeman, Brown, are you here to, the three, nope, you're just listening? Oh.
I think so.
Go ahead, Gasper.
Came, I might as well talk, right? Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity. I just wanted to advocate the two-lane of Monroe. You know, Capital Region has invested quite a bit of money into the facilities. I arrived here in 2014, and at that point we were talking about two-way Monroe, and that was the time when we added the physician office building and the expansion, which was close to a $40 million project. Now, since that time, we've been talking to city officials and county officials about getting that project on the next list. There was some discussion a few years back about doing some preliminary work, but You know, you all have a very hard job in choices, right? There's a lot of really great projects that are out there that you all, as government officials, need to kind of decide what is best for the city, and they all have merit. But from Capital Region's perspective, I also am part of the CDC for Old Munichburg, and also I'm the vice president of the Old Munichburg Association. We submitted that H3 study to the city, and it was adopted by the city a few years ago, and that was part of the plan was the two-waying of Monroe, amongst a lot of other things. So, you know, just advocating for that particular project. You have obviously the Capital Region investment. We're now in the process of investing another $20 million in an outpatient surgery center that is right along to Monroe. I will tell you, during the tornado, there was a lot of discussion of the difficulty of getting from kind of the Highway 50 to Stadium. That created some issues from a medical emergency standpoint, and so having another thoroughfare that could get to those two main arteries is important from a health perspective. The H3 study also outlined that from a safety standpoint, having two-way traffic gets more eyes on the community, and that would be of benefit as well. And then, of course, recently with the tornado, you have a lot of development on that Stadium Monroe piece of ground that the high school is doing that will revitalize that entire area. So for all of those reasons, as you make your all's deliberation, we want to just stress the importance of two-waying Monroe. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Yep. Do you have a question?
Yes, sorry.
Matt had talked, and you talked a little bit about strictly just two-waying, and then there was also the proposal to basically make it a corridor. At this time, would you be comfortable with just the two-way, or are you looking at the more extensive project, making it basically a corridor in addition to two-way?
You know, of course, the extensive is the preferred, because I think from a community redevelopment standpoint, H3, when they did the study, was suggesting that, because it really kind of provides a little bit more emphasis on that particular area, and the ability to kind of have that road be a little bit more appealing, if you will. Importance from, you know, my perspective is that two-way traffic, the ability to get from Stadium to 50, that's of importance to Capital Region. So prefer the
I just want to make sure I had the distinction.
yeah.
Thanks, Gasper.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
no one on the chat has
Okay.
asked for comments.
Thank you. Anyone else here in the gallery wish to speak? Question for you, Mr. Marash, then, building off of Councilmember Fitzwater's point.
Yes, this works if I talk in here.
Yeah. Is there somebody online, Britt?
Glover Brown.
All right, go ahead, Glover.
I just wanted to allude back to something that Mr. Moran said. There were economic development funds that would possibly be available for infrastructure projects. And so my question is, hypothetically, if we have a developer that is looking to develop west of the 179 interchange, which is on the ground currently owned by Hawthorne Bank, what would the developer need to do to access those economic development funds in helping to secure the infrastructure there? And I believe it was approximately 1,200 yards from the interchange to the city limits, which was at the end of the bank property west. So what would the developer need to do if they had a competent development plan to access those funds to get that infrastructure built?
Well, I'm sure staff can fill in with a little more technical detail. My council response would be, you know,
in the past, when we have negotiated and entered into development agreements on these types of projects, there's been an actionable development plan, and it's not as though those funds are just accessible because there's a project. It still requires the council to make the designation and put it towards the project. And so it's not a pool of funds that anyone just applies to receive, but that's a negotiated process between the city and the developer, and ultimately the council and the developer to make that final decision. And so I'd be clear that within this capital improvement sales tax and that economic development category, that's still council discretion to make decisions on those. And if it's a joint project with the county, it's a council and county commission discretion to make those decisions. And so I know over my time, we have fluctuated in where we've allocated that and treat that as kind of a nimble category to sort of address needs that come up. I'll look to our city attorney, Mr. Molman, to see if I've spoken clearly or needs clarification.
No, I think that's absolutely correct. And to answer the question a little more poignantly, there's lots of ways to do deals like this. You know, as wide as the sky is, that's as many options that you have. But typically, the crux of it is some sort of cash commitment from the developer, whether that's cash commitment to help build the infrastructure, cash commitment to, to actually complete the private project, or, some sort of participation in the infrastructure. What you won't see is a commitment of funds, of public funds, in exchange for this is coming. Essentially it's kind of what Matt was saying is, for example, the St. Mary's project, they put up a letter of credit to guarantee the project essentially. It'd have to be something along those lines where if the project weren't able to happen for whatever reason, the private project weren't able to happen, that the city is left whole in some means. It's, like I said, lots of ways to do it, but the emphasis is the developer is bringing significant amounts of cash to the deal to complete some sort of component of the project to essentially ensure that it happens.
Thank you, Mr. Molman.
If I may, I have a follow-up question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Given the understanding that there needs to be a confidential development agreement, whose function is it to design that particular roadway, not only from the interchange to the city limits, but from the interchange west to Rockland? Now, whose ultimate responsibility is that to design that roadway? Is that left up to the individual developers, or is that a city-county?
Go ahead, Mr. Marash.
Yeah, it's really all the above. I mean, it could be. We would have standards that the developer would design it to. It just depends what the negotiation came out as. But I think with the master plan we have, basically our expectation is starts at the interchange. You got to start there, and it's got to end up pretty close to where it is on the master plan, so it can be extended in the future. Now it has some ability to move around in between those 2 points, but logically, it not much.
Right. In my experience with these types of greenfield developments, it's the developer designing it, taking on the risk of the design work and paying for it, with the city and the government authority essentially having approval authority over it. So, they do the legwork and then come back to the city and we either say yes or no. There's a lot more collaboration than that, but essentially it's the developer taking on the risk in these types of kind of wide open field developments.
So just as a matter of record, who designed the Mission Drive east of the 179 interchange? Is that St. Mary's?
Yeah, the consultant designed that project, and that contractors run through MoDOT. It was that's a big project. So the primary design function was the interchange, but
the city and county then worked with the same engineer to design the Mission Drive extension. But again, that was all wrapped up in that development agreement of how that occurred, and yeah, it had a specific development it had to serve, and that kind of thing.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
So you're saying that is a collaborative effort between the city, the county, and the engineering firm? Or
I think the
design function by the city?
I think the answer is that it was a consultant with MoDOT, the city, the county, but it was wrapped up with a development agreement with SSM Healthcare that put up a line of credit for the construction of the project as well. Is that correct, Mr. Marash?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Britt, anybody else?
No, just a reminder to those that are listening virtually, putting comments in the chat. The committee does not have an opportunity to see those chats. If you would like to speak, just simply notify us that you would like to speak.
Mr. Freeman, I'm not putting you on the spot. I just know you're here, and were you wanting to speak today on?
Just very quickly, and thank you all for your time.
Glover, we've got another speaker right now.
Oh.
Nope, stay up there, Mr. Freeman.
Okay.
Something happened to my access, I'm sorry.
Proceed, proceed, Phil.
Okay. I thank you all for your time and your commitment. Monroe Street has been a complication for years. Having 2 blocks of it as one lane makes absolutely no sense. As Gasper pointed out, during the tornado, it created a terrible problem getting emergency personnel in and out of the area. A couple other things have happened since then, and Gasper highlighted it, that Capital Region is going to be spending an additional $20 million on a surgical center, bringing more traffic into the area. And I think all of you have seen that the schools will be starting in the spring with a sports complex that will bring additional traffic into the area. Also, it will take a lot of the traffic off of Madison Street as we try to increase the flow in and outside of the south side area. So I think it would be a very important project and would be a great benefit to the south side, the old Munich-Berg, and the south side CDC. So that would be my comments to it. Questions if you had any.
Any questions for Mr. Freeman?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Anyone else? Going once? Alrighty, let's proceed forward to Mr. Sanders, who's also here to talk about capital improvement sales tax, but related to demolitions, I believe.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Proceed.
I'm going to be brief because I gave my presentation at the work session, but just want to remind everybody the detriment of dangerous buildings. They are a hazard to the public, the health and welfare of neighbors, brings down property values, and actually promotes crime and other things. We have a dangerous building process, and as we go through that process, many of the structures will veer off from the direction of ending up on the demolition list that we have. We have a backlog right now of about 10 buildings that we estimate would cost $340,000 to demolish. They're on that list because that's the last resort. There are no options. We have done everything we have with our processes to remedy the situation. We have 11 more that we're going to have hearings on this fiscal year. And actually, since the work session, I think we've added 3 more into the process. So as these buildings sit and we get a backlog, we estimate that we'll probably have 5 more each year for the next 5 years added to that list, 4 or 5. So the amount of buildings that are sitting there until they can be demolished by the city is going to double to probably about 40, in the end of 5 years, about 40 buildings at an estimated cost of about $1.75 million. Now, currently, we do demolish some with CDBG money. This budget, we have $80,000. We're doing 4. Those are not on the dangerous building list. They've gone over to Habitat or some other good cause like that. Getting these buildings removed would open up property for redevelopment. That is one reason we talk about acquisitions. Monday at a closed session, I'm going to go into detail and actually propose one, so you'll actually see how that might work. There's several different ways that acquisitions can work. We have a 353 program that could be part of it. The city certainly could be part of it. Nonprofits could be part of it. We also hope to get some funds down the road. Perhaps some of our CDBG DR money, disaster money, might be able to help. But the total amount that we're going to get is about $2 million. Certainly, we'd want to facilitate other options for housing and rehabilitation and recovery from the tornado. This could be considered an economic development tool. It would bring up property values, infill development, bring more people to live in the heart of the city where most of these buildings are. It could also be considered a capital improvement. May not necessarily be the cities, but if we own the properties and we help facilitate getting affordable housing, workforce housing on them, that would actually help everybody in the community. With that, I'm not sure exactly where it does fit into a category for sales tax H, and certainly I don't expect to get the whole $1.75 million, but some would be appreciated and help. You'll see when Mr. Helmut gives his presentation how our property maintenance folks have been more proactive. 3 of my divisions are directly involved in taking care of these dangerous buildings. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you, Sonny.
Thank you.
Any further committee questions, conversations related to item 2, which is the sales tax? And I would just add that the ballot language was introduced at the last council meeting. It could be voted on Monday night to put forth on the ballot. However, the ballot language doesn't say anything specifically about projects, nor is that a requirement, correct? So the conversation around how the dollars are spent will continue.
It's not a requirement, nor is it even permissible. The statute's pretty clear
Yeah.
of what the ballot language has to say. So listing projects probably wouldn't fly under state law.
So if you see council take action Monday night to place it on the August ballot, do not assume necessarily that the council has made a decision about where those dollars could be allocated or that they've approved some sort of project list. So, all righty. I'm going to wrap it up on item 2. Item 3, very exciting, wastewater rates. Mr. Marash.
So this is kind of the follow-up to our discussion from last meeting where, I gave a presentation about basically the wastewater fund and the status of that. So really, I think from that discussion, we hadn't raised our wastewater rates since 2017, and our construction project is pretty well went very, very low. You will see a bill for Binder Pump Station. That's one of the last big projects finally that we'll spend the rest of that money here coming up in the next month or so. We'll have that bill ready to do that work. But that would be it really for very large construction projects. So this would be what the council would need to do. This proposed ordinance would be how we would suggest to raise the rates in the wastewater fund. So we included a draft bill of what that would look like. But it's pretty simple. The chart on the screen isn't actually the code modification. It's more for the fiscal note clarification. So in other words, if you're a homeowner and you use 4,400 gallons of water a month, and that's in the wintertime months, 3 months average in the winter, January, February, March, that's how your bill is calculated when you're not out washing your car or watering your garden or whatever you're doing outdoors. That doesn't flow into the sewer system, obviously. So that's why we do it that way. But what we're suggesting here, we went back and worked with our consultant and said, okay, if we want to pursue that $44 million need we talked about last month, how can we do that in a reasonable fashion of raising rates that doesn't get too carried away with folks' bill? And so we come up with, if we could institute a 2% this summer and then 5% thereafter to 2027, that's in reality what your bill would go from and to. So if you're currently paying and using that much water, paying about $31 a month, this June that would go to 32.
The following year, it would go up about a little over $1.50 to $33.66, and so forth and so on. But that would be the ramifications to what you're paying, actually. And I think if you recall our presentation, you know, having this in place allows us then to go and look at bonding big improvements. Now that's an additional step that we're not suggesting we do right today, of course, but we would like to get this in place in the code. The third page in your packet is actually the code modification. It doesn't look like that, but it talks about, you know, the minimum fixed rate and the volume, you know, volume of water you use. So that's the code modification. You can see in bold in that page, in 2017, that's the last time we had changed it. And then we just add this to the bottom of that table in that fashion. But the I would say that we also, Steve, myself, Ryan, Margie, Eric Seaman, met with, or had a Zoom meeting or whatever you want to call it, with the bond council to discuss, you know, okay, you know, if we do this, is this going to set us up for our future to be able to borrow money? And they agreed that this, you know, doing it in this fashion, even before you go to a vote, is good. So you're going ahead and you're starting to accumulate some funds, so that way when you come back, or if you had to do something because of a compliance issue, you don't get this big rate increase all of a sudden in one fell swoop. So, you know, incrementally, this is the kind of the best way to go about this. Really the soonest, practically the soonest you could do it is if you really wanted to go for bonds, you could do it in the November election. And we're not suggesting that because there's a lot of things going on with elections and taxes and things right now this summer. You could do it then, but you'd have to have all your stuff ready for ballot language in the August timeframe, which is right when we're talking about voting for other things. So that would probably get lost in there or muddy the water. But so really, the more practically, you know, maybe next spring this time, looking at an April ballot or something like that. But this chart would get us in place for that, get it in the code, and let us move forward. So we could have this on a bill next council meeting, not next, but the following one, with a committee recommendation.
And I guess my only comment, just to highlight, because you didn't go into great detail here today, but you did previously, was the cost of doing nothing in terms of rate increases and bonding and tackling these projects could be significant if we hit a compliance issue. And you presented at that point in time some examples of communities that saw their rates double or more to deal with a compliance issue passed on by state or federal authorities, correct? Correct.
You know, the city was lucky enough back to when we did have a compliance issue in the early 2012, 13, some time frame there, that we already had a rate structure like this in place. We already had the vote for the bonding capacity to do it. And so really the citizens didn't feel any difference other than what they were already going to experience. And then we had to work through a 5-year project list with the feds and the state, EPA and DNR, to do a bunch of projects. But we already had the funding and the mechanisms to do it in place. Many communities, you know, if they get in that situation, you know, they're not so lucky and they see large rate increases. And if you look at our rates from this, you know, what I showed you last month, probably should have had both these together, but I want to kind of, you know, discuss the idea first and educate everybody on it. We could have redid it, but I knew we had a long agenda. But yeah. I can certainly redo that presentation if we move this forward to the council and make sure everybody's aware of what we're talking about before they had to vote on something like this.
Any questions or comments from the committee?
If you could just walk us through the thought process. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with the optics of raising the rates on everybody, and then we're looking at decreasing the late penalties. And I don't know how many people are late, but to me it just seems like diverging optics, where we're saying we need additional money and then we're taking away one of the tools. And I know you state in here that it doesn't really limit the delinquencies, but it's just, to me, it doesn't seem like it's good optics.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that part, actually. And they're not directly tied to one another, but if we have the code open, a lot of times we just try to make some cleanups.
several years back, I know maybe less than 10-ish years, this changed to the 5%. Eric's just giving you a kind of what that actual dollar amount costs. The thought was at the time that it would decrease delinquencies, and really what's happened since, it didn't really do anything for delinquencies. It just made everybody's bill they had to pay off higher, and then we get chasing certain individuals around. So it's kind of is that it really didn't incentivize people to pay the bill by charging them higher late fees. People that were delinquent on the bill were probably, just going to be delinquent on the bill for whatever reason. So we, if we had the code open, we could change that. It wouldn't necessarily have to go along with it. I think we looked at some other utilities like UE and things, and their delinquency fee was lower. So I think this kind of mirrors some of that.
Anything?
But again, it doesn't have to occur at the same time, but just cleaning up ordinances while we're in there.
I guess I'm just not comfortable with that piece. I mean, the rates are out there. I mean, people are willing to pay late and pay that fee. I mean, that's a decision process they make. But if we're going to raise it on people that do pay on time, and I think I like this disincentive for people that decide they don't want to. Thank you.
Would you be interested in making a motion to move forth with striking that part of the proposed bill?
I would move the rest of it with the amendment to strike that piece of it.
Is there a second to that motion? Second. It's been seconded. Is there further discussion on the motion which advances the rate increase but keeps the late penalty at the 5%? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr.
Very
Marash.
good, thank you. So we'll get that together. It won't be this Monday, but it'll be the following meeting. Hopefully we can have it together.
Okay. It will.
Try to do a more thorough job too of presenting the issue.
Yeah, I was going to say if we want to get it done this council season, you'd want to get it on it no later than that first April meeting, and we could do it the second April meeting.
Yeah, we're going to have new members. That'd probably be a good thing.
Yeah. Okay. Item 4, which is transit grant application, I believe is Mr. Mamert, who is, I believe, on the virtual meeting.
That's correct.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Proceed, Mark.
Wanted to make you aware, the council and the committee aware of and ask for endorsement of a grant application to replace 8 Handy Wheels buses. This is a grant called a 5310, a section 5310 grant, which is geared toward enhancing the mobility of seniors and individuals with disabilities. One of the eligible projects that we have for this type of grant is the funding of buses, which is how we would intend to use those dollars if our application were successful. All of the buses that we're talking about replacing here have at least approaching or on the cusp of the 150,000 mile mark. Some have over 210,000 miles. So when a bus of this size approaches 150,000 miles, the cost of maintenance typically rises dramatically. So we're anxious to move forward with procurement and replacement buses. We currently have a total of 10 Handy Wheels buses, and it's very unusual and also not our preference to replace 10 at one time. Unfortunately, there's been a delay in MoDOT getting a state contract in place, and the number of buses which need replacing have been stacking up. Since the state contract for bus procurement is not currently in place, a total potential grant funding figure is not fully known yet at this point, but we would anticipate project costs to be in the neighborhood of $600,000, require approximately about $120,000 or 20% match from the local entity, and available capital improvement program transit matching funds. You've got a full agenda, and that's a brief recap, so if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Mamert. Any questions from the committee?
And just one thing on this, I stayed up here. So we were talking about this, and since we had the meeting, we went ahead and put this on there. We have some authority on some applying for transit grants without going through the typical process of grant application. But since we had the meeting, we want to notify you of it anyway, so we'd have a resolution on the council kind of in accordance with our grant application procedures to apply for this money.
You want a motion today from us?
That'd be
then?
great.
All right, is there a motion to send forth to the council?
Sure, yep, or
Moved.
second.
Seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Mamert. Item 5, parking garage update. Mr. Smith, who's getting his steps in today. How many steps is it from the control room to the podium, Britt?
My wellness plan would need a few more of those, I'll tell you. I appreciate the opportunity. I know we've had a long agenda, and I'll try to make this brief, but at the same time, I wanted to review a project that's been going on for quite a few years to make you aware, and we're hopeful that you're going to start seeing some things on the council agenda as we move this project forward. So this is just meant to be a review. There's no action needed on your part today, so we'll jump right in. Back in 1999, the city contracted with Rich & Associates to complete a parking planning study. Later in 2004 and 2005, we as staff did an internal review of that and made some modifications. And those modifications also included some rate structure changes. Later in 2016, the city contracted again with Rich & Associates, because it had been quite a few years, to take a look at focusing of the parking and update and focus primarily on our downtown core area. When that study was complete, we moved forward and said, let's take a look, and we did a contract amendment with the consultant and took a look at 5 potential sites for a feasible garage. So what they studied initially, when I'm talking about in the 2018 study, or excuse me, 2016 study, we're just looking at the downtown core and trying to look at our parking needs. And what we hoped to learn was whether our existing parking supply was adequate, and if there was modifications that needed to be made to that supply to not only meet our current needs, but the future needs of our downtown. The study area is here. And I can tell you, one thing that if I were to have my Wayback Machine, I probably would have made this a smaller study area. Because looking at, the topography of downtown, where our downtown core kind of centers on High Street from the Capitol, through that corridor. The hill from parking down at the bottom of the hill is quite strenuous for folks, speaking of a wellness program. Some of our data seems to get skewed when we're looking at that, because we do have quite a bit of parking supply, on the lower side or McCarty side, but our parking customers don't believe that is an appropriate place to park. So here's all the parking lots within our downtown area, both public and private. The purple would be state lots. The red are privately held lots. Some of them might be for customer parking, but some of them probably are for employees or private use. Those with red stripes are our reserve parking lots, the ones where we lease parking to monthly customers. And then finally, the green would be public parking, where visitors could park for whether it be for a short period of time or for an all-day parking. You can see the green is pretty much the minority in that snapshot picture. So what did we find? We have almost 10,000 parking spaces within that study area, between both what we control and from the city, and then the rest are held within private. Kind of a blow up on this is directly from the study. We control about 29% of the parking within our downtown area, and based on our consultant's experience, that's not a good thing. Trying to get into that 50% level allows us to manage the parking where it's best for the entire downtown, as opposed to, you know, one particular person who has a lot of parking for their needs, but it's not available for their neighbors, et cetera. And so, you know, though our overall low occupancy rate, there's pockets of shortages. And that's what I alluded to in that earlier slide, that, you know, the areas down over the hill sit vacant, but the ones closer to that main corridor see a very high use. You know, this is, you know, from the study, and just showing the time of the day, and you know, a snapshot of when they did the study of, you know, the red obviously is areas that are full, and as we go toward the greens, it's not. And you know, you would put that on the a map, and you would, I think we'll have that in just a minute. And I'm just going to skip through this, but the last item bullet there is that there's, at the time of the study, there was 40,000 square foot of building space that was remained vacant, plus 31 units. So we're trying to make sure that we're anticipating that potential growth and ready to be ready to support it. So what the study found is that we had a shortage of parking currently of, you know, a little under 15,000 parking spots within our downtown. And you know, with infill, where we would get to 80% vacancy, you know, 80% of our spaces would not be vacant, then would grow to about 1,600 cars, or 1,600 spaces, excuse me. This is a block by block comparison. The red shows where there's a block with a deficit for that particular block for their needs. The blue shows that there's a high surplus. The green, I wish they'd chosen a different color for this chart. The green means that you're almost ready to be red. So it's, green generally means you're in good shape. But so what we found, and again, that is for that particular block need. And obviously the capital is in this big red block right here. And the reds are all kind of centered in that same corridor that I was talking about. But whenever you get down at the bottom of the hill, you see a lot of the blues. This is where we have a lot of available parking, but as I said, customers don't find that desirable. Zooming in, so we started looking, you know, to try to meet that deficit. Where would be the best place to put a parking garage? We asked consultants to study 5 potential sites. We started here with A, and B is here. This is behind, excuse me, the A site is behind the post office and Erices, if you're familiar with that. Our B site would be the area behind Hawthorne Bank, there between the alley and McCarty Street. At the time, this was a city-owned lot, and what has been called the Gungelfinger lot, an area that here we said, you know, let's see if we could shoehorn something into this using some of our existing space, and then the same over here. Excuse me, I messed that up. This is the Gungelfinger over here, and this is the lot that's currently owned by CenturyLink. So, and then the 5th one, which we added after, that's reason it started with A here, was over behind the Supreme Court building. These are some privately held parking lots, and we wanted to take a look at that because it's, you know, similar to these others in size, et cetera. Walking through it, we found that the best site, the one that best suited our needs, was at what we've termed the Central Bank lot, and the one behind the library, or excuse me, behind the post office. There's 2 parcels of ground that are affected. One is owned by the Central Bank and is currently a parking lot. The other parcel is an older warehouse facility and some vacant space as well. So we've been in negotiations with these 2 property owners and believe we're getting close for being able to bring forward a contract for sale. You know, we have willing sellers, and of course we would be a willing buyer. What a garage would look like in that particular area, preliminary studies found that we could net an additional 311 spaces. The garage would actually be bigger than that, but there's existing parking lot there, so we wanted to net the increase. So that's a net increase of 311 spaces. We would have an entrance off of the McCarty Street side, which would be our main entrance, and it would be a scissor-style garage. It's preliminary concept. This is all obviously subject to change. Excuse me, I should have pointed out another feature. The primary entrance would be here off of McCarty Street, but we'd also on the third level would have an exit onto the alley. So that would provide for a walking, well, first off, you'd be able to drive in and enter there, but at the same time, whenever you park, you go to the top level and you'd be walking out essentially on the level of High Street. And we're still working with Central Bank on the possibility of an easement either through one of the buildings that they own or through an existing parking lot, and trying to put a piece together of what that could look like in the future to be an added amenity to the downtown. But regardless, even having the entrance to the alley, you're still halfway up the hill, even if we were to have to walk around. So, potential design features, something that would fit in with our downtown, in a brick facade, tilt-up panel type construction. These are simply just design concepts, nothing that, we spent a lot of time in getting to an architectural look at, but just to give an idea of what, one option could be. So our next step is to finalize those agreements with our property owners, and then we're currently in negotiations with a financial consultant to kind of look at our bond capacity to see what it would take from a rate structure wise to support this construction, and then we either at the same time or soon after we'd be looking for hiring a design consultant to begin the design process. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Smith? Mr. Marash, you want to add something?
And just to add, Britt did mention it, but it wasn't the primary. But we're really close to having an agreement negotiated with both property owners, and we would want to put those on a council agenda as one item. So you bought two properties at once, so we couldn't just do one. But like you said, we've been pretty successful in those negotiations thus far. I don't want to jinx it, but I mean, you could literally see a bill on this maybe in the first meeting of April, it looks like.
And we actually hope to have it on the coming agenda, but it didn't quite work out that way.
Make it. So we're a little coy with, hey, we have a contract coming, but there really is. I mean, I'm looking at drafts of it yesterday that could be on your desk, and so we wanted Britt to just kind of go over the need again. I know there's probably the COVID issue. People say, well, is this parking coming back, that kind of thing. We're seeing a pickup already, and so I believe it will. And we're located right next to the state government capital, so it's always a big parking need.
Questions, comments? Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, if you could just refresh our memories how this works in tandem or against the current needs on the Madison Street, Capitol Avenue garage, and
yes,
some of the dollars we're going to have to spend there.
Yes, I should have touched on that. Ed's, I've been the bearer of bad news the last couple of meetings. I brought forward our vehicle needs, and I brought forward the condition of our existing parking garage, and I was looking forward to actually presenting something that was more on a positive side here. So our existing garage needs work, and we need to deal with those issues within the garage. The problem with dealing with those issues is many of them will require closures of large sections of that garage. So if we can continue to make our good improvements to make sure that it is a good and safe place to park, which is obviously our goal, until we can get this one constructed. It'll allow us to move some of those parkings into this area to allow for that construction with the least impact into our customers by still providing them with a quality place to park as we do a renovation of that garage, which is sorely needed.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just one other question. Do we ever get any comments from OA, any concerns they have about adequate parking around the Capitol, or they kind of leave that to us?
Yes, actually, we involved the Office of Administration when we did the parking study, and they are concerned about the shortage of parking that they have in that area, and would certainly welcome the garage addition. That statement didn't come with money, but it certainly came with a desire.
In this facility, I know the current garage, we have public restrooms. Are they proposed in this garage? Because I hear from individuals periodically about the lack of public restroom facilities downtown, and if that's part of the
We haven't gotten that far in the design process, but it's certainly a good question that we would need to work through. And I agree that there is a need for public restrooms within our downtown. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that this one would be the best location for it. I mean, but certainly we would probably be looking at something like that, but I don't want to get ahead of the designer, because that space is valuable, and we want to be able to make sure we have the parking spots. Our hope is, or my hope is that we design this garage with minimal, I wouldn't say monitoring is not the right word. I don't want to be in a booth situation, I guess is what I'm saying, where we're paying somebody to sit in a booth and take, there's a lot of technologies out there that will help us with that, so we don't end up with a lot of extra personnel cost associated with this addition. But at the same time, we need a nice amenity to the downtown. And so through the design process, we'll certainly be taking a look at that.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Smith. Keep rolling along. Item 6, housing and property inspection update. Mr. Helmick. Thank you.
So today we're going to talk about property and housing inspection. It's just a review of 2020 and the beginning of 2021. In 2020, code enforcement completed 6,011 actions or violations within the city limits. Of that, it was about 3,805 properties that were inspected. So some of those were multiple violations on the same property. We were able to achieve a 96.9, so 97% voluntary compliance, which meant working with the owners of the properties, we were able to get compliance without having to do abatements, hearings, summonses to court, anything like that. So I'm going to go through this pretty quick because I gave you guys handouts so that way you can look at it afterwards, and I know you guys don't want to listen to me, especially if it doesn't work. There we go. Abatements, so we did 125 abatements. Those would be the folks that did not voluntarily comply. In 2019, we did 145, so that's a good number to have go down. There were 95 properties that received tax abatements in the year 2020, and with that, 66 owners of those properties. So we're really talking about a low quantity of property owners that are getting abatements or not complying voluntarily. Of those 125 abatements, 6 were owner-occupied properties, 29 were rental properties, and 90 were abandoned or vacant properties, which is a decrease from the previous year, which is what we want to see. We want to see that we're educating the property owners and they're doing the right thing without us having to do it for them. So over the last couple of years, we've taken a proactive approach to streamlining our current processes as well as updating existing codes and receiving citizen and city council support to do those. The ones that we've done that have had the largest impact are the Dangerous Building Regulations Code, which Sonny talked about a little bit. We've been very active in going after the existing dangerous buildings as well as new dangerous buildings that are showing up. The landlord registration, abandoned buildings, weeds and nuisance weeds, and then also we changed the administrative cost over the last couple years. All those things have allowed us to be more proactive and efficient. Last year, about the same time in March, we came before this committee and talked about rental inspections. We decided at that point that the code enforcement would do an exterior-only rental inspection. We were able to complete 1,799 rental inspections, resulting in 260 violations in the year 2020. So far, in 2021, we've completed 1,695 inspections, resulting in about 107 violations. Last year, we didn't start until March. This year, we started, of course, in November and December, so we were able to get a jump on that during our slower time of the year. So it gives you kind of an idea of the rental inspections that were completed. These addresses are submitted by the property owners under the landlord registration. And as we continue throughout the year to identify new rental properties, or as we receive new rental registrations, this changes. We take properties off as they sell. We add properties as they get purchased or turned into rental properties. But that gives you an idea of the areas that we were out inspecting. Because we were able to do that so early in the year, and then also with the SmartGov software that we are utilizing with Mobile Inspect, we have now been able to start a proactive street-by-street inspection. What code enforcement's going to do is every 3 to 4 months, we're going to drive every street in the city proactively. Doesn't matter if there's complaints or not. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at every property, we're going to look at every vacant lot, every house, all street view, so it's all going to be from the street or sidewalk, from the public right-of-way. And we're going to just look at the general overall health and safety of the neighborhoods. It's going to allow us to get into areas that maybe we weren't getting into before. We started that in the month of March. We're about halfway through. When this map was created a week ago, those were the streets that we've already driven. The SmartGov allows us to map them as we're there to prevent any kind of overlap or double inspections. Of course, as we drive the streets, if we do notice a violation, we put that violation in, we go back, follow up, and it goes through the regular Chapter 21 nuisance procedure. But this just shows that we've driven those streets. And these addresses that you see the dots on aren't necessarily problem properties. They're just random addresses generated by Midmo GIS to make sure that we got on every street. The ones remaining as of that look something like that. And as we inspect the streets and the inspector puts that they drove down the street, that dot will disappear from this map and go to the other map. So we'll have real-time tracking of it as well. So that's really the big exciting stuff for us this year is the dangerous buildings and doing the street-by-street reviews every 3 to 4 months. So trying to be proactive and get out there and answer any questions or anything you guys got.
Appreciate the update. Just a couple questions.
Yes.
The voluntary compliance, I mean, it's great that it's continued to increase. In terms of benchmarking that against other cities, are we high? I mean, 96.9% feels really good.
Yes.
Okay.
We're very high. Most of the cities that I look at or talk to run in the 80s.
Okay.
Our inspectors really, that's our number one goal is to get voluntary compliance.
Yeah, I imagine there's probably lots of properties where the folks didn't even realize it was an issue. And then on the rental inspection, $17.99 in 2020, $16.95 this year. Are those overlapping properties? Are you hitting properties again this year that you would have looked at last year?
Correct. So what we're doing is annually we want to hit every known rental property. So in the year 2020, we started in March and we wrapped up about the end of April, beginning of May. This year we started in November at the new fiscal year and wrapped up a little earlier. But that will continue to change throughout the year because we do continue to do the inspections as needed. So.
And I guess finally, somebody could look at this and say, oh my goodness, violations are going up. And not necessarily, we're just seeing more of it.
Right.
So
Alrighty.
we're able to be more proactive. We're able to, instead of having to drive back and forth, we're able to do all this stuff from the field.
Yep.
So it allows us to achieve more with the same amount of resources and the same amount of time.
And if somebody has a concern about a property nearby them, who should they contact at
So
City
they can
Hall?
either contact code enforcement at 634-6410, or on the city's website under property maintenance, there's a contact us button that takes them to the citizen portal. The citizen portal, they can put their complaints or concerns in there, and they can also just answer or ask general questions. Those all come to me, we assign them, and they can also track and follow up right there and receive their answers to their questions.
Yeah, do we offer the opportunity for somebody to submit it anonymously? I know-
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, 100%. If you go through the citizen portal, it does allow you to submit it anonymously. You just hit anonymous. I don't see an email address. I don't see where it comes from, nothing. But it does allow you also to submit your information so that I can contact you and follow up and do those things.
Great. Any other questions, comments from?
Chair, if I may,
Yeah.
I just kind of wanted to highlight something, and going back to Sonny's previous presentation on the sales tax, if you take a look at the abatement numbers, and it was 125 abatements, and so I just kind of want to make the council aware, what that means is expenditure of public dollars. And while we have some means to recoup that, usually we're not recouping that at 100%. And so that is expenditures of public dollars. And then right next to that 125 was 90 of those were at abandoned and vacant buildings. And so the best way to reduce, expenditure of public dollars on abatements is going to be reduce those kind of chronically abandoned and vacant buildings. So it's all interconnected. And so I just kind of wanted to make sure that the committee has that in their mind when looking at these kind of disparate components of this program. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Item 7 is the 2018 Building Code Review Process Update. Mr. Kryling?
Yes.
All righty.
Yes, that's
And
correct. Thank you,
fairly
Mr.
new-
Chairman.
Fairly new to us.
Yes,
though,
started
right?
in October.
Well, welcome. I don't think we've been in person probably since then.
No,
so
I'm a new face, and all of you are new faces for me. So,
welcome.
I've got several items. There's been some changes in the building enforcement department, and of course with COVID, some restrictions on meetings. So my first item here with the 2018 Building Code Review, Council passed a resolution last February, formed an ad hoc committee to review the 2018 codes, to look at adopting those from the 2015, which we currently enforce. They held one meeting at the end of February. They held one technical subcommittee meeting, I think at the beginning of March, and then in-person meetings got shut down. We're going to pick up that process basically from the beginning. I've got 6 of the 7 ad hoc committee members that have confirmed they're willing to participate. So later this month, we're going to start into that process and hope to basically take that process that would have taken about 4 to 6 months last year and move it to this year. So hopefully here towards the end of the year, we'll come back to the council with recommendations on that. Really that simple. Just wanted to let you all know that shut down for a while, but we're going to pick it back up and get through that this year. Are there any questions? No? Okay. I was going to say I can go on to the next item if you like. Again, changes in the department. Our building official, Larry Burkhart, left the department in July. Then we had an interim building official, Dan Vandevoort, that was also helped with plan review and mechanical inspection that left around the time I started in October. So I've taken the position over for Larry. With Dan leaving, we've kind of got a gap there, and this will kind of roll into the SmartGov, the permitting implementation too. But as we've worked on permitting processes and plan review processes, that position that Dan held was designated a plan reviewer. We're looking at replacing him with a mechanical inspector, similar to how we have building, plumbing, and electrical inspectors. So just wanted to make you aware, see if there were any comments about that. That will help with our mechanical code enforcement. That mechanical code was adopted with the 2015 codes for the first time. And so as that awareness has come around, the permitting is increasing year to year, we want to bring on somebody with the expertise to enforce that code properly.
Any questions, Ron?
I just had a question. Is there a financial impact to that change or potential financial impact?
There is actually a potential savings. The plans examiner position, it was a grade or two higher than the two different grades of inspector on the pay scale. So there's actually going to be a small savings by converting that position to an inspector.
That's music to his ears. We like you already. Are you looking for an action from this committee today, or is it something that'll come?
I don't believe we need any kind of action to do that. It's not a new position. We're just kind of changing the.
There we go. The job description for the building inspector 1 and 2 already account for, I mean, the position's already created, it's already on the books. We would just vacate the building plans examiner position and hire a building inspector 1, 2. The job description doesn't change or anything like that. I do not believe, Steve, or if, I guess HR is not here, I don't believe there's really any council action. It can be done administratively. We're just seeing if there's any questions or anything like that. We have been, the previous building plans examiner, his background was mechanical, and he actually left to go be a building official. So we were permitting and we were inspecting mostly large mechanical systems.
Questions, comments? All right, you're on item 9 now, the review board.
Item 9, we're actually going to pull off the agenda, so we'll get
Okay.
through that one even quicker. We'll probably bring you something back in April. We wanted to take a little more time to review kind of how we put that together.
We like you even more now. Item 10.
Number 10, again, is just a quick update. Last year, with COVID relief money that came, I think, in the fall, and the opportunities there. As you've heard from Dave, we've implemented some SmartGov software in the code enforcement, and that's helped to streamline some processes. It's a customizable software, so even after we get the implementation done, if changes need to be made, there's things we can do in-house without having to go out for new software or big changes from the software vendor. That process has begun. We've taken mostly our existing processes with some improvements that I've worked on with staff to how maybe inspection workflows and things work and how the permitting and plan review workflows will work. We've gotten all that information together and to the software vendor, and now because of the COVID money and several communities looking at getting newer software, we're kind of in a bottleneck to get the actual software made, but starting next month, the vendor will start building out that software for permitting and inspection. It should bring along some of the benefits of better coordination for plan reviews. It allows for the mobile inspection similar to what code enforcement is using, which will help economize their time in the field and reduce having to come back to the office to enter things into the computer system. They can enter those inspections right there. And then it also allows for a public portal. At the tail end of this, you should be able to go online and apply for permits online and do that whole process from either from the field or from your home or wherever you're at. So our leg of it is through. Now we're waiting on the vendor, which will start next month.
Thank you. Any questions? It's good to see
Mr.
you.
Chair?
Yeah.
May I just add to that briefly? Part of the project also includes, we take several different types of applications for assistance through our CDBG program. That is going to be part of it, and that's really going to be instrumental as some of our disaster relief money comes. There may be more programs that we can take advantage of that. And then an extra bonus, we currently, for our environmental health inspectors, food restaurant inspectors, they have a software that is outdated. We're paying about $4,000 a year maintenance on it. we're able to get those reports and what they do created for about $800 as part of this project, where we will no longer need to be paying that $4,000 plus annually. It will be wrapped up into the enterprise licenses. So when we got the new software, the model changed to be enterprise-wide. So actually, every division in PPS is going to be using SmartGov one way or another, and Dave has actually started training some of the staff where you call in with a property maintenance issue, the person that answers the phone at the front counter will be able to take that for you and put it in the system and not have to be transferred to someone else that may be out in the field. So we are already seeing some of the efficiencies. So he's trained, I don't know, quite a few staff, not me yet, but it's really neat.
Are they intentionally keeping you away from the system, Sonny?
No.
You don't have to answer, but.
Well, I had a career where I was on the other side of that with the technology, and it frustrates me that I have lost a lot of those skills in the last 15 years. So but I'm going to. So when Steve asks me a question, I can just look it up, and then I can train Steve.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Item 11, scooters in right-of-way. Mr. Molman.
Thank you. So the city's been approached by Bird Scooters. So Bird Scooters is probably the largest, or at least in the top 2 or 3 scooter ride share companies in the country. And they're interested in entering the Jefferson City market. And so the city has some experience with these scooters through our previous relationship with Spin. And so Spin deployed back in 2018, was in the city through the 2019 season, pulled their scooters for the winter, and then when the spring of 2020 came, essentially said they weren't going to redeploy. And so essentially our relationship with Spin has ended. And so there is no scooter company operating within Jefferson City right now. And so Bird has approached the city in reaching out to my cohort of legal professionals throughout the state. This seems to be a statewide push that they're trying to get into several communities in Missouri kind of right now. Lots of people are working on things with Bird. And so what I wanted to bring to the committee was input on our current approach and how we want to approach these types of things in the future going forward. So the genesis of our relationship with Spin was actually through an RFP for bicycle ride sharing, if everyone recalls. And so the initial process was a request for proposals for bike sharing. And so Spin came to us with kind of a dual model of both bike sharing and scooters. And so eventually the scooters kind of overcame the bikes. And so in the last year, Spin was strictly scooters and not bikes. But that worked. Essentially, we had an agreement with Spin, and it kind of limited the amount of scooters in the city and set up some information sharing, which, while very good in theory, had some issues in practice. But, you know, essentially, Spin was our exclusive franchisee, if you will, of this type of service within the city. That is not how all cities do that. And in fact, Jefferson City's exclusive franchise approach with Spin was fairly unique. It seemed to be nationally. Most cities were opening up the market to kind of anyone that would, you know, sign a more standard agreement and just kind of let the market play out. And so with this desire of Bird to enter the Jefferson City market, the question is raised of whether or not the city council wants to kind of stick with a more exclusive type arrangement with a single company, or if we want to kind of open up the city to multiple companies to provide this service. And so, and Bird is eagerly awaiting an answer on how we're going to approach this, because what I did tell them is if we are going to enter into some sort of exclusive arrangement, we're going to have to go through some sort of bidding process. We just can't anoint Bird as the single company. And so I think there's advantages and disadvantages. I briefly outlined them in the memo that was provided in the packet. But you know, essentially the main things are, with an exclusive franchise, you get to work with them very, very closely to kind of monitor and regulate what they're doing, including limiting the number of scooters that are present within the city. You know, just make sure the city's not overrun with scooters. You know, the other option and the other advantage is if you open up the market to, you know, many different companies, and it allows customers more choice. And so as opposed to, you know, regulation driving performance, you would hope that competition would drive performance and make these companies, you know, kind of perform and be better stewards of the rights of way and when they're operating their business. And so, you know, that's a policy decision of the city council of how we want to go forward with these types of businesses in the future. I do not think that shutting out these businesses, just saying, you know, we're not going to do this in Jefferson City, is going to be an option. I think that either through litigation or legislation, it's going to come one way or another on a more permanent basis, I think, to Jefferson City. And so I think it's worthy of discussion of figuring out how Jefferson City wants to deal with these companies and kind of have a more long-term approach in our regulation of these companies. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on this. We can move it on to the city council, or we can kind of take a direction from this committee. It's really kind of how comfortable you guys are with really kind of pointing in an initial policy direction.
I remember with Spin, right? That was the company. I know they negotiated a contract with a local vendor to manage, I believe it was Mobile Tire or something like that, and he even outfitted special trailers to charge these things. Like, do you anticipate that Bird scooters would be doing something similar again?
I would think so. I'm not 100% sure current on their practices on how to get their scooters deployed, but that seems like a likely model. Yeah. The more random approach, I think, has been being moved away from, where it was just kind of anyone could grab one and plug it in and hope they get a couple of cents from the provider. I think it's more of an organized approach. It's proving to be the better approach for the companies.
And then following up, if I recall, at least from what I heard last time with scooters, was any concerns mostly, I think we had to clarify about where they could sort of operate on the street, these kinds of things, but really it was just about them being left in places and trying to work with the company to make sure that they weren't just dropped in a sidewalk or, you know. And so in an open use format, do we still retain some teeth to sort of hold them accountable?
Yeah, and so the difference is going to be the depth of contract with these companies, not the existence of a contract. So with an exclusive agreement, you know, you're setting out the entire world of how the relationship is going to act, and could include things like revenue sharing. You know, I don't think that's ever going to produce a ton of revenue, but it could be an opportunity for, you know, for something that you put in there. With a more open model, we would say, okay, we have a standard contract where essentially you're going to agree to operate in a minimal manner. We're going to set a floor, and part of that floor would be, you know, making sure you don't stack up 15 in one thing, you know, in one intersection, and that you're instructing your riders to, you know, dispose of the scooter in an appropriate manner, you know, to keep it out of the middle of the sidewalk. And in fact, one of the things that Bird is doing now is they're requiring their users to take a picture of the scooter after they left it, so they can kind of say, okay, well, it's, you know, it's not strewn out in the middle of the road and it's upright. And so it's the, yes, to answer the question, teeth either way, it's a question of how big those teeth are.
Thank you. Any questions? Ron, then Dave?
Yeah, if you could just clarify, can they be used on sidewalks, or can we restrict them? Yeah, I'm not a big fan of them, but I know that people like them, and, you know, I'm not opposed to them being here if we can put some kind of restrictions on where they can be used.
Right.
I mean, there were a lot of them used on sidewalks, and my understanding, they weren't supposed to be last time.
Correct. Yes, the one good thing that about our previous relationship with Spin is that we kind of clarified a lot of these rules, and you're absolutely right. Scooters were not supposed to be used on the sidewalks. They could be used on the greenways, kind of our super sidewalks that are, you know, 8 to 10 feet wide, but a general, you know, 4 or 5 foot sidewalk, you're not supposed to use the scooters on there, and that would remain in place. Like a lot of things, the key is enforcement. You know, and so part of you know, a contract, whether that be an exclusive contract or some sort of you know, some sort of more open contract, would be some minimal standards on education of riders that they're not supposed to be using these on the general sidewalks, and that they really need to be using these out on the street. You know, whether that be some sort of notifications on the app or you know, actual instructions on the scooter itself. That's something that can be worked out, but if that is a priority to help with enforcement of the city council, that's something that would get into any contract.
If we set up a revenue sharing, does that expose us to any additional liability, since we're stand to make money on it, versus if we're just setting up the rules? And you know, I know we can always be brought into a suit, but does it open us up for any additional?
It could. I do believe that the exclusive contract raises the risk profile, but I think it raises the risk profile pretty minimally, because with an exclusive contract like that, what you're going to do is you're going to build in appropriate indemnification and protections for the city. So that way, if something does happen and we do get dragged into a lawsuit, we essentially call on that indemnification or hold harmless provision in the contract and say, okay, Bird, it's your responsibility to defend us in this case. You know, the risk there is, you know, the event of bankruptcy or something, you know, that makes Bird disappear, and so that they can't stand in, you know, in between a plaintiff and the city. That's why I say it raises the risk profile, but only kind of minimally. It's not something that I would be terribly concerned about.
Mr. Pemna?
You said that Bird has approached you, and you said that we have maybe the option of going into an exclusive contract with them or opening it up to a bidding process.
Yeah, no. Our options are an open kind of, anyone that wants to come and try their hand at this business in Jefferson City would sign a pretty basic agreement. Or we could go with an exclusive contract, which in order to achieve that, we would have to open up to anyone. And the assumption is that Bird would bid as part of that. Now, that's not saying Bird would win. You know, when we did the bike sharing, you know, we thought we were going to go one direction, and we went a complete opposite direction because of the bid of Spin. And so it would be a competitive process that Bird would participate in, hopefully, but we would have to open up kind of to the entire world.
Has there been any other companies that have?
Bird's been
shown
the only
interest?
one that has kind of formally reached out to us, at least that I know of.
So at this point, it sounds as though you need some direction, whether that comes from us as a committee or the full council.
Could I ask?
Yeah.
So if it's open use, is there some kind of a permit or license that, as a service?
Yeah, I think that's actually probably the absolute correct way to do it. It's a license agreement to use the right of way to conduct a business.
Any preference from the committee on a direction to head? I guess I would be, oh, go ahead.
I mean, I'd be more prone to get the rest of the council's opinion on
Yeah.
this, you know, if that's the desire of staff, but I'd like to have their input too on this.
Yeah, I guess I'm intrigued by the open use in the sense of, I wonder if that would bring more providers or provide the service in a different manner. I
Right.
think maybe more detail on what exactly that means.
Sure,
would be
yeah,
beneficial.
and kind of the one thing that really kind of struck me the most, as we saw with Spin, when you have an exclusive provider and then the provider decides that they don't want to be in business, you know, in Jefferson City, what you're left with is a tail period where you are without the service. And so, you know, that's kind of the situation we're at right now, whereas, you know, if you have more of an open thing, there'd be less chance that this service wouldn't be provided in Jefferson City for an extended amount of time. Now, there's some people that would say, hey, that's great, but like I said, I don't think this is gonna be an industry that the city's gonna be able to avoid until it's really kind of proven whether or not this is something that's viable, you know, for a long-term transportation needs, you know, kind of throughout the country.
Generally with services, I'm more for open use and competition. But I know you have to have in place regulation or, you know, to make sure that, you know, legitimate service providers and you don't get taken advantage of or people get hurt. So.
Great. You have what you need, Ryan?
Yeah, we'll get
Okay.
it, we'll get some on the city council agenda.
Okay, thank you. We're good.
Not unless you tell me otherwise.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
Item 12, which is the MS4 permit renewal, Mr. Fontana.
Yeah, morning. Our present MS4 permit, and I don't know if you remember what MS4 stands for, but it's Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. It's our discharge permit, allowing us to discharge stormwater out of the city limits. It expires in September, and so we are in the process of a public notice period of the new permit. It's posted on the city's website, and to allow the public to comment, we have to write a stormwater management plan that states how we're going to comply with the permit requirements. And you know, there's 6 main parts of the permit. I've read through it, and I don't have it committed to memory, but the main difference between the new permit and the present permit is we're going to have to do quite a bit more inspection of the stormwater pipe outfalls and more training of staff. But you know, this is just basically just to let you know if you have any questions, if you read through it and have any questions as we write the stormwater management plan, or if you get people with questions, just send them my way and we'll address them.
Thanks, Don. Any questions, comments? Sounds very detailed, and I'm sure that it's exciting for you to review.
Yeah, I notice I'm not at the top of the agenda, so you know it's pretty thrilling stuff.
Well, just real quick.
Yeah.
You know, and the one reason to bring it up, I mean, number one, we have to have it discussed at an advertised meeting. That's one of the primary. But 2, Don hit on is there is a lot more training type things. So we're looking at some technology to, you know, like if you're sitting at the street department, you can click in and say you've been to this training as a staff person or whatever. There's probably some cost to that, obviously. And then this inspection. So right now we have a person that goes and inspects sites for, you know, track out and erosion control, things like that. And so now, you know, we're adding a different workload to that. So, you know, we'll have to shift some of that unless you were to hire a new person or something. We're not suggesting that at this point, but it is a significant change in that regard by EPA DNR types that they're requiring of us. There's no option really out of it. And there's always compliance issues with this as well, like wastewater.
Thanks, Don.
And one last thing, the city will be audited at some point during this next 5-year permit cycle. It'll be, I think, by DNR this time, but the permit is, I think, a lot more well-written and streamlined. So as long as we address what's in that permit, then we should be fine.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. Item 4, citizen opportunity to address council staff on stormwater and other public works issues. I believe you're here for this, right? So go ahead and come up to the podium, state your name. You can adjust that microphone, and just kind of make sure you speak close to that so that the audio picks up online as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to read because I'm not a public speaker. I am here today because of a problem with my former landlord, William Patterson. We lived at 1211 West McCarty Street for 6 years. This is one part of a duplex. Between the two duplexes is an alleyway to get back to the garages for both duplexes, so all 4 garages. A sinkhole developed down the alleyway at the corner of 1211 West McCarty Street. The city put up yellow fencing around it, but someone in the next duplex kept driving through it and taking down the fence. Therefore, on June 16th, 2016, a semi showed up with one of the barricades that you see on the highway to block the alleyway. I talked to Louis Albert, who was in charge. I told him I had 2 vehicles down there, plus a garage full of personal property. He told me the barricade was going in now and repeatedly told me to call the city attorney. I talked to the city attorney. He suggested a meeting, and I'm going to butcher these names, I'm sorry, with Matt Marash, David Banji, and Dave Helmick. I was told by them the barricade would have to stay up. Mr. Banji said they would check with the landlord 2 doors down east of us to see if our vehicles could be moved through their property. They have a fence up. They're not going to take the fence down. The sinkhole has continued to expand. There are now several sinkholes behind and in front of the barricade. A big one in front of the barricade caused by Mr. Patterson's 2 employees when he took out a washer and dryer and just threw it over the barricade, literally, and caused another sinkhole. We ended up moving from 1211 to 1209 West McCarty Street because of the problems, multiple problems, not just the sinkhole. We had sewer back up in the basement. He did nothing about it. Our living room ceiling fell in on us. We set 6 weeks with an exposed ceiling, no insulation. So he moved us to 1209. In January of this year, I moved away from there due to a COVID-related death of my fiance. We had to take everything up the driveway, over the barricade, and to the trucks. Now the problem I'm having is that my landlord, Mr. Patterson, has stated in a text, quote, holding deposit until cars are gone. I'm not responsible for that. I should not be held responsible for the fact that I cannot get my 2 vehicles out of that backyard because of the barricade. What I'm asking today is that the barricade cannot be removed, or it is not the city's responsibility to move the barricade, that the city give me a letter stating this fact so that I can pursue this with Mr. Patterson and get my security deposit back. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you listening to me.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? I guess I just have one. Are the vehicles, there's 2 vehicles?
There's 2 vehicles.
Are they both operable?
There's actually 3 vehicles. The person that was in 1209, they snuck out in the middle of the night. They left a Lincoln Continental back there. I've got a Suburban and a red car. I don't know what it is. And no, neither one of them, they've sat there for 6 years while the barricade's been in, so they've got flat tires.
Okay.
And He told me when I left the property that the only reason my security would be held was because if he has to take care of this and use his Bobcat and his employees and put steel plates down to move them, it was coming out of my security deposit to do that.
Well, I'm sorry for the loss of your fiance as well that you mentioned.
Thank you.
And so I don't know if, seems like staff's been involved. I don't know if there's a recourse, Matt, or.
I can try to explain the issue, and I'll come up there to do it. I think we had some slides that we could show you of the issue. I'll just come up there.
Certainly this has been going on quite a while, and we actually presented about this at a committee meeting in 2016. And by no fault of the renter here, you know, this occurred, but obviously this is just on West McCarty, just down the street here. These two buildings are duplexes. They were constructed this way. And we got a call about a sinkhole, so we went out and investigated. Typically, Don Fontana is the lucky one to start that process. But we found that there's a major box culvert coming down the street, and we don't know how all this occurred. It was so long ago. I'd estimate these being built in the 50s, maybe somewhere in that time frame. I think it's a 6x6 box culvert coming down the road, and then at some point in the 50s when these were constructed, we're anticipating is that somebody built a small box culvert and hooked into that because there was probably an open channel right through the middle of these lots, and built these two rental properties. They don't look like the houses around them, so that, you know, it's typical you kind of leave the ditch for last, and somebody did this at this point. But the city doesn't have any easements on the property, anything like that. So, but as you heard from Mr. Helmig, at the time, you know, we often get involved on the tail end of these things when they come so dilapidated, it becomes a problem for the city. So obviously with the folks living in them, there's really nothing we can't really dig these properties up. The top of the box is at the bottom of towards the bottom of the walkout, if you will, on the back side. So you can imagine trying to dig a big hole right next to a building. It could fall in or at least damage itself. At the time, the building official, Larry, I think it was saying, well, it's a dangerous condition, so we know about it, we ought to try to block it, that kind of thing. And so that's what we did. Cars were driving over it, and so forth and so on. Anyway, so what the resolution that this group came up with, because we knew eventually it would go to code enforcement, we'd be looking at it anyway, maybe try to be a little more proactive. Next slide where we have the, I guess I got the clicker. Whoops, sorry. I hit it and you hit it. So we came to the group and said, okay, you know, the real solution here from a stormwater standpoint is just to reestablish the open channel, be the cheapest way to do it. Even when if the property owner walked away from it because it became uninhabitable, that, you know, it would need to go through this building. It couldn't go through the 1209 building labeled there. It really need to go through this. So we actually contact the owner. I have a letter in the that I sent out yesterday and a email to, I think, Mr. Kroll, anyway, where we had offered, you know, the assessed value from the assessor's side of about $50,000 for the property. We'd buy it and then tear it down and presumably do this. At the time, the council said, yeah, that seems like appropriate use of the money for the stormwater funds from the CIP. We're going to end up with this problem eventually. And here, 5 years later, we're still talking about it and still a problem, still a bigger problem. If somebody can chuck a dryer over a concrete barrier and knock a hole in the street, obviously you're not going to drive a car over it. You know, you might be able to plate it, but, you know, again, the city has no easements, all that kind of stuff. We don't really want to be involved in that internal dispute between two property owners and take on any of those risks. This is the ultimate solution. The owner never responded, or they didn't think it was enough money, whatever. We sent them a letter then that summer, said, you know, the offer's still on the table, please respond. No response. They said, you know, we're not interested. So we put our barrier in place and moved on. And so we're still at that point, and it's unfortunate that she's gotten caught up in this mess, but that's what I know about it. And I suppose if the council, this is a different council than then, some of you, if the council are still willing, we can still make the same offer. You know, maybe it still stands. You know, we still have to go back and check our stormwater money
is that appropriate use of money or not? You know, the councils might have different opinions on it, but eventually it will be over here, Mr. Helming. And I know Matt, our new official, I think he was going out yesterday afternoon. I haven't got to talk to him about it to look at the condition, but we can discuss it in more detail later.
I remember this now.
Yeah,
Like,
fun
now that you
stuff.
put the slides up, I'm like, I remember that. Steve,
So we
did you
just
want-
had to look around and find all these letters, and here we go.
Yeah.
So, just for clarification, we wouldn't be involved in the landlord-tenant dispute. And secondly, Matt, it is not, in our opinion, a city problem necessarily. It's a private issue between the property owners, and we've tried to accommodate that, but it really is a private issue there, as far as the
Correct.
solution.
And, you know, it does, obviously, the light red lines above the dark line is the, I think, 6x6 box culvert. And obviously, if that were to plug up, cave in, whatever, and the house is dilapidated and sitting there, it's gonna be a problem for the whole neighborhood, because you got a lot of water coming down here, it'll start popping out of the ground in this location. And there's other people living around by no fault of their own, and that's why we suggested what we did. But really, you know, we had an estimate at the time, buy the house and demo it, you know, because demo is significant sometimes. And then as reestablished, just dig it out and make a channel there and let it go. Or it actually goes back in another system. But as I recall, or is it an open channel? I don't remember. Oh, open channel, yeah. It goes into an open channel, then they're just right down from it.
So it certainly impacts our system.
So
but
that, you know,
it's
this is a
not-
good lesson why we have standards on building codes and all of that good stuff, and stormwater enclosing when you do anything to a channel. You know, the city still regulates it in the city. Now, in the 50s, what happened, I don't know. Wasn't alive.
There, I think that we may have thought that the property owner may have been online. I don't know if that's the case or not. I would ask, is there anybody else online or virtual that
Nope.
is involved with this? No, okay. So I think Ms. Coyle's request is that the city at least acknowledge that it is, you know, a private issue, which apparently we've done, and we have that on the record.
Alrighty. Thank you. I know that doesn't maybe necessarily provide all the,
And what the
Closure
thing we
for
can
her,
do though
yeah.
from here out, obviously, I think Dave was here obviously, but you know, Matt wasn't at the time, new person. Time has went by, obviously more problems according to her anyway. I haven't been looked at, or Don I think's been out late recently, but go ahead and maybe look at that code enforcement process again to see if it needs to be enhanced or move forward in some way because of what's going on. And that might end up being a resolution eventually for this.
Due to the deterioration, continuing
Yeah, further
of the
deterioration, is the building still habitable? You know, you mentioned some things that went on that maybe our building guys aren't aware of, or code enforcement guys aren't aware of. So now we are, you know, this year, many years later, and we can look and see if that warrants any extra attention.
thank you. Anything further?
I just want to say that we did call the city several times, the health department, to try to ask for an inspection, and we were told that the renters have no rights in Jefferson City. We were not, nobody came out and inspected our home. The health department, the city, nobody came out and inspected it.
Go ahead, Sonny.
Dave, have you been in that building? Would you allow us into your unit of that building? Oh, okay.
I
Well,
moved.
and I believe Matt went out yesterday to look at the structure, and from the exterior did not see anything that would be, I don't know, I'll let you speak. I don't want to speak for you, but.
So, yeah, I was there yesterday. It doesn't look like there's deterioration of the actual dwellings on either side. I don't see anything shifting or moving with whatever's going on underground. Obviously, that can change over time. But at this point in time, based on the photos from 2016 and going by yesterday and taking a look at the structure, the structures themselves aren't moving, so it still remains kind of a stormwater issue with that private box culvert underground.
Okay. Yeah.
In 1209, back bedroom, the corner where the sinkhole is sinking. In that unit, we had to put, are they called shunts, under curio cabinets, my desk, everything, because they were unlevel. It is going down.
Yeah.
When we moved to 1211, we didn't have that problem. The furniture was all level.
And that might be like Matt's perspective. He's permitted to look at an exterior view from
Yeah.
the public right of way, and so it could be from the exterior view that doesn't show up.
Right.
But interior, is anybody living? Do you know in the property that you?
He signed a new tenant in the day I moved out.
Okay. Okay. And I would just clarify too, and you mentioned health department, like the city doesn't necessarily have a health department. If you're talking about like the county health department, a lot of times, I just want to clarify, like if a tenant, just for clarity's sake on that point, if a tenant has concerns about their rental property and wants an inspection or some eyes on it, what specifically should they do, Sonny, or what exactly are their rights?
I'll let Ryan speak on the legal aspect of their rights, but if a tenant has an issue with their unit, certainly they can call our Dave's group and allow us in there, and we will be glad to inspect it for life safety and health issues. We would welcome any renter to do that, actually. That would maybe help identify more properties that are a concern. But in terms of tenant rights, I don't know if Ryan wants to chime in on that.
Well, I mean, tenant rights as between landlord and tenant is, governed by the lease and fairly set of complicated state law if there is no lease. I'm not prepared to speak to that,
Yeah,
but
no.
as it relates to the city, if a renter of a housing unit has issues with the housing unit and think that it is a dangerous condition that the city needs to take a look at, city officials can go into rental properties based on the invitation of the occupant, the tenant, and so I would say that is an option that remains. That if someone says, "Hey, you guys need to come in here and take a look at this," I'm concerned for my health safety. I think that provides an opportunity for the city to enter those and take a closer look on the interior.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Which we did request. We asked that somebody come look, and nobody did.
Okay. Mr. Lester.
My understanding is a lot of renters are kind of reluctant to do that because they have no protection if then they get inspected, but then they can get evicted.
Yeah, and I believe that's been a topic before when we've discussed rental
It's-
inspections, is
it's a
fear of
problem.
the tenant,
Yeah.
especially, or damaging that relationship or, Well, thank you, and appreciate you being here, and I'm sorry for what you're going through. Anything further on this particular section, item 4? Okay. Anything further, Councilman Fitzwater?
I just had a request, and we don't have to do it at this meeting. I don't want to catch anybody off guard, but could we get an update on the activities around the problems at Bald Hill Road and, some of those issues we had several months ago? I just had a comment from one of the individuals that was involved in it. They've since divested of their property, but I would just kind of would like to get an update on where we stand, if there's any legal challenges out there, anything we need to be aware of moving forward. But we can do it at a future meeting. It's not something we need today.
Maybe at the May meeting?
Whatever, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Just kind of briefly, I can tell you that there was a notice of potential future claim, but no lawsuit has followed that. So essentially, there's a process you have to follow in order to sue the city, and the first step in that process is to inform the city, hey, we're going to sue you, or we may potentially sue you. And so the city has received that. We opened a claim with our insurance provider, but there has been no petition to follow up on that, and that's probably been 5 or 6 months now. So, but the statute of limitations on that's pretty long. So I wouldn't read anything into that one way or another.
And then just one final comment. I know that bulky item trash pickup is April, correct? I know we're a little bit,
Yes, it is, I believe.
Okay.
I don't have that with me right now, but I'll remind, oh, Rachel's here.
yep. And
Just a moment.
I know it's posted on the city website. I've just seen some social media comments and just heard folks, and I saw an article in the newspaper about MoDOT referencing trash on roadways and that sort of stuff. And I've been badgered a little bit by folks that say it looks like there's a lot of trash in the city right now. And I don't know if that's a product of winter and COVID, and maybe our Adopt a Highway, Adopt a Roadway groups have not been out as much. Still somewhat sad, I think, that if those groups miss a pickup or two, our city or roadways start to look bad. So it's just a public reminder of folks to pick up their trash, dispose of it properly. And the bulky item pickup coming up that's the appropriate way to dispose of bulky items, not to leave things on the side of a road. Make sure people, if they have open pickup trucks and such, to make sure that they don't have trash blowing out. But I mean, I was at Memorial Park a couple mornings ago at the playground, and I threw away 3 or 4 water bottles that were within 10 feet of a trash can that had plenty of space in it. And so it's clearly people are just, we need to do a better job, I guess, to make sure. And if there's groups out there, I don't know. I know that a lot of times Adopt a Highway is a MoDOT regulated thing, correct? And those groups have to, I think quarterly, they've got to go out and do we have anything internally, just twice now? And is there anything internally at the city? Do we have Adopt a Street groups, and do we hold them accountable, or?
We do, and I'm going to let Rachel talk about the frequency of requirements if you want.
Well, you can, I'd hate to put you on the spot. I saw another post yesterday. It's just one of these things that I feel like a lot of people are saying, there's a lot of trash. What's going on?
We have also noticed a lot of trash, and it does tend to be a problem around the spring bulky item pickup, because people are gearing up for it, and they're working a couple hours here and a couple hours there, and they keep taking things out. And what really ideally what the city would like is if people took it out the weekend before to have it picked up. And just so everybody knows, the 2021 spring cleanup is west of Highway 54 is April 12th, east of Highway 54 is April 19th. Those are Mondays. If you bring your items out that weekend before, that's okay. Anytime earlier, it's a code enforcement violation. As far as just trash in general, you know, we all know that we've had challenges, and I suspect that may be with the winter weather. Maybe it just got all piled up and they couldn't get picked up. So we're still trying to catch up on that. But it shouldn't be happening anymore. So it is a code enforcement violation if you put your bulky items out before the weekend before your cleanup. As far as local, we do have Adopt a Street program that's ran almost very similarly to the MoDOT program, as well as Adopt a Spot. So it can either be along a highway or a beautification point that's within the neighborhood. So those are all options for citizens to participate in. We do ask them, they are supposed to file a report. They are supposed to let us know when they have done a cleanup so we can go by and pick up their garbage for them.
Thank you. And I think some of the complaints that I've heard, Arnie, it's not necessarily somebody putting bulky items at their curb early. It's more just along a roadway or a highway, seeing like insulation. And I almost attributed some of it too, just, you know, with half the city getting new roofs and gutters this past year, when the trailer left my house with the tarp strapped across with all my old roofing and guttering, I thought, oh boy, I don't know if all of that's going to actually stay on the trailer as it drives away. And so
it's also probably winter.
Yeah.
Nobody's out picking up when it's so cold, or you have snow coverage and then the snow melts and it exposes what's there.
Okay. Well, just a reminder to the public to help us in our efforts to keep the city looking clean. So that is what I had. Anything further from the committee? Seeing none, we're at the end of the agenda. We are adjourned. It's good to be in person.